Welcome to the Kennedy Profession, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long time. Well, it's been a long time since I saw you last. If you're listening at crusadechannel.com, because we had a long weekend and I was away Friday. We had a pre-recorded great interview with GOAT, greatest of all time, not the greatest of all time radio host like Mike Church, greatest of all time Canadian politician Randy Hillier. That was such a pleasure of mine. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching right now on Meeting a Catholic, you're watching on the live stream. And this is one of those newsworthy days. And we're going to get right to it. Because if you're listening on the Meeting a Catholic and you're watching, you can see that I'm wearing the Canadian tuxedo. No, it's not a jean jacket and jean pants. I think that's like an Appalachia tuxedo. I'm wearing a Canadian tuxedo. It's flannel. And I'm wearing the faced sweater. And Ian St. France says good morning or good afternoon from South Florida. The reason why I'm going live stream today and I've also, for the people that are watching the live stream, I've tried to figure out a way to use another XLR mic for the live stream. I think I figured it out. So if the audio is no good on the Meeting a Catholic stream, please let me know. But I think it's good. I know the audio is great at crusadechannel.com because we always give you the best content, the best quality possible. Go to crusadechannel.com/go to sign up if you're not already signed up. We're going to talk about the SSPX. Ian St. Francis audio assault. Perfect. We're going to talk about the SSPX. Well, real quick. Rome has dropped a bomb. We know this. Rome has dropped a bomb. If you weren't paying attention to the news, you're probably more mentally healthy than a lot of us if you're not watching the news. But if you weren't paying attention to the news, you can probably see that Rome has dropped a bomb. It is what it is. They've come after the sacraments. Chris Ferrara, a couple of years ago, when something happened the Ecclesia Day, he said, watch out, this might be coming. People thought he was a little bit too extreme with it. Turns out he was right. They came up with Traditionis Custodes back some months ago. That was bad enough. And now they've basically forbade, at least tried to, the traditional sacraments outside of going to Holy Mass. And how long will that take? Anthony Abate says, what's up, Kennedy? Glad to see you're awake. He always makes fun of me for not waking up in time, but really he is on Twitter and YouTube all day, so clearly he's unemployed. So anyway, in any case, so what's happened is that the Vatican has essentially dropped a nuke. Now, the question of the SSPX has come up already with many people. And because if people don't know, if you're listening at the Crusade channel, you probably know what the SSPX is. At the off chance that you're watching this video either on replay or live at the Meeting a Catholic, welcome and thank you for watching. If you don't know what the SSPX is, real quick, it's the Society of St. Pius X. It's a priestly society of priests that was put together by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, who in my opinion was a saint, in the opinion of many was a saint. I believe he's the Athanasius of our time. He stood up against not just one heresy, but the synthesis of all heresies. You know, people will say, he's no St. Athanasius. And I'll say, I agree. St. Athanasius had one heresy to worry about. Marcel Lefebvre had the synthesis of them all. No small task. And the way that he responded to that, in my opinion, is he used the synthesis of all truth. What does that mean? Well, the synthesis of all heresies is modernism. So how do you fight the synthesis of all heresies? You use the synthesis of all truth. I mean, if heresies are errors, and if there's a ton of them, well, then you just come back with the truths that would fight those errors sufficiently. Well, the synthesis of all the truths of the Catholic faith, simply put, is that souls are to be saved. That's it. Salus animarum suprema lex. There's a fancy Latin term that makes me sound smarter than I am. And it's the whole point of canon law, for example. And the canon law in canon 1752, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it says that, you know, the supreme law of the church is salvation of souls. So every law has to be seen within that. So if the bishop says they have a law in our diocese, and this law is to implement a inoculation segregation, which a bishop in my diocese has done today, and he's kicking out priests who don't comply, that goes against salus animarum suprema lex. You see what I'm saying? If you kick out priests because they don't want to make the same medical decisions as you, then you have less priests to administer the sacraments. Therefore, that law goes against the whole point of the church, which is to what? Save souls. So Archbishop Lefebvre saw the church, and the priests of the Society of St. Pius X see the church through that lens, and they always have. There's been a political stuff. There was the consecrations in 1980. That's a whole other conversation that I've talked about this at length on the Meeting a Catholic. Tim Flanders has talked about that at length. Me and Jeremiah Bannister about 2 years ago, just before 2 weeks to slow the spread. We had a wonderful, lively conversation. It was called Lefebvre, Hero or Villain. Taylor Marshall's talked about this. The SSPX Crisis podcast has talked about this. I talked about this with Eric Sammons. That's probably the best one. If you want to know sort of, excuse me, what is the Society of St. Pius X? What about it? Who was Marcel Lefebvre? All these nuts and bolts where you need all of your questions answered because this is a difficult time. I would advocate that you go watch my conversation with Eric Sammons, the Crisis Magazine podcast. And I think it's called Confessions of a Lefebvrevist. That's where we spent an hour, and we've only got about 15 minutes left here on the live stream. If you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you're going to have to go to crusadechannel.com/go. Link is in the chat, or the link is in the description. But what is the Society of St. Pius X? Again, for the full length description, go to the Crisis podcast, Crisis Magazine podcast with Eric Sammons. Okay. It's clear from church teaching, from the various documents, again, that you'll find if you research more by going to watch my episode with Eric Sammons and watching Tim Flanders talk about it on this channel. It's clear that you can go to the SSPX. It's since 1996, it's been known. Well, actually, since 1991. In 1991, after the 1988 consecrations, which were controversial, of course, there was a bishop in Hawaii who had excommunicated or tried to excommunicate a family or various families who had received confirmation for their children from a bishop of the Society of St. Pius X. I can't remember. I think it was Bishop Williams. It doesn't matter. One of the bishops. He excommunicated them. He said, they're excommunicated from our diocese. The logic being essentially that they had some sort of adherence to a schism. Okay. Excuse me. Well, those families appealed to Rome. Now, think how long it took Cardinal Burke to get the dubia answered. He never has had it answered. Rome will only respond to things if they think it's important to respond to. I know plenty of people who have sent in procurator mandates, for example, and some of them get answered, some of them don't. This dubia that came out, that's basically the response to the dubia is basically nuking the traditional sacraments. That was responded to because it was advantageous for the agenda from the Vatican. But Rome will only respond to things if Rome, for some reason, has the motivation to. And it's not, and this is sadly in our era of political corruption in Rome, and it's not necessarily always for good reasons that help the faithful. Well, in 1991, the families appealed to Rome and said, hey, we shouldn't be excommunicated for this. None other than Cardinal Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI. He replied very quickly. It was in a matter of weeks and months, which is unheard of because the church moves in two speeds, slow and slower. And said that they, overturned the judgment of the bishop. Now, not only is it very unlikely that Rome will respond to things quickly, it's even more unlikely that Rome will ever do something to basically humiliate a bishop and say that he's wrong. But that's what happened. There must be good reason for that. That was 1991. And the reason being is that there was no formal adherence to schism by those who had received confirmation from the Society of St. Pius X. That's in 1991. That's just 2.5 years after the consecrations. Excuse me. 1995, 96, there are letters coming out from the congregation that was in charge of these things. And you need to understand your church language to make sense of these things. It will say things like, attendance at the SSPX fulfills Sunday obligation, and there is no sin in doing so. But they'll say things like, but you also have to make sure that you don't have any formal adherence to schism. So people read that and they go, whoa, they said schism. That's a pretty big deal. Oof, man, I don't want to be in schism. That sounds bad. But it's smoke and mirrors, because through actual judgments of the church, it's not the case that they're in schism. Schism is a very particular thing. You have to essentially out and out reject who the Pope is and not pray for him in the Mass. You can be disobedient. You could be a jerk. You could be unwanted. You could be a meanie. You could be a criminal. You could be excommunicated. You could be lots of things. Schism itself is a very particular thing. It's a repudiation of the papal primacy. Disobeying the Pope is not an act of schism any more than disobeying your father is an act of separating yourself from your father. Your father might just be wrong. That's just the reality of it. So they've never been in schism, formally speaking. Whether any priest in the SSPX has ever been materially schismatic is something no one can ever comment on, just like no one can ever comment on whether a priest in a Novus Ordo diocese is materially schismatic, i.e. if he rejects papal primacy. That's something that a man has to do himself. No one can know. In any case, it's been the case for a long time that you can go to the society, even according to Rome. And these letters that say things like don't have any formal adherence to schism, they're just smoke and mirrors. They make the faithful who don't understand church language, and why should they? Things shouldn't be this complicated. They make people nervous. And the reason they do so, it's kind of like this. Imagine if you said to your parents, "Can I go hang out with Jimmy?" I know Jimmy's like, some people aren't really sure what to think about Jimmy, but he seems like a really nice guy to me. And like, we just want to go play kickball or something. And I like playing kickball. No one else will play with me, and he wants to play. And your dad says, "Yes, you can go play kickball with Jimmy, but just as long as you don't smoke crack while you're there." And you're thinking, what? I wasn't even thinking about smoking crack. Is Jimmy a crack smoker? Does Jimmy have the reputation of being a crack smoker? If I go play kickball with Jimmy, does this mean that people are going to think I smoke crack? I probably shouldn't go play kickball with Jimmy. There's no evidence that Jimmy smokes crack. You see where I'm going with this? These are just things that they put out there. It'd be like saying, sure, you can go. You could say the exact same thing about the Novus Ordo Diocese situation. You know, could you go to the Novus Ordo? Well, yes, but it would just, make sure that you don't adhere to a spirit of apostasy while you're there. You're thinking, wait, is that diocese in apostasy? Why would they tell me that I can't go with Father Bob at his Novus Ordo Misse? Why did you bring up apostasy? I don't want people to think I'm an apostate. Eesh. And you don't end up going. There's no theological truth to it. It's just completely smoke and mirrors. Well, here's the thing. If you're just joining us right now, if you're watching on the live stream, there's a bunch of people. Thank you for the comments. I love the lively debate, by the way. And I'm just going to say from my actually, there's a comment here. Okay, there's a comment here from a man or woman, I don't know, White Wolf. I like the emoji there, or the avatar. It says a lot depends on the view of the crisis in the church and how apocalyptical it all is. I think what this person is trying to say, as far as can you go to the SSPX or not, I think the person is trying to say how apocalyptical that person's view is of the crisis. So I used to wrestle with this conversation, and I'm not putting words in your mouth at all, White Wolf, or anything. I'm not saying one way or the other that what you're saying is good or bad. This is using as a talking point. When I had discovered the Society of St. Pius X, it was probably 2018, early 2018, somewhere around there. I'd already been going to traditional things, but I had discovered the society. I came across this idea of crisis. And I enjoyed where we went to mass. I'm still friends with some of the Novus Ordo priests that we used to attend to. They were nice. They were good men, faithful men. I have no animosity. It's not a matter of, it's not an anti thing. I always wanted to make sure if I was going to make the jump to the society that I wasn't going there because I was against something. I was going there because I was for something. Now, obviously, if you're for something, then you're de facto against a thing that's against that for. Fine. But what I meant was I didn't want my primary motivation to be, well, I'm going to go to mass here because I hate these guys. That is a schismatic mentality insofar as what St. Thomas Aquinas says is schism is a sin against charity. So you can have a horizontal schism where you're against the Pope and reject him, so to speak, as being the Pope or having any primacy over you. You can debate what is a part of his primacy, but you have to admit that he has it de facto. But I didn't want it. But a horizontal schism is like, well, I won't have anything to do with those Catholics because they're not the kind of Catholic I want to be. You're getting schismatic-y there, meaning you're saying I'm better than them. If you follow that logic all the way through, you get to the Donatist heresy, essentially. Again, that does not mean you can't discriminate between good and bad situations. You might say, and there's a question here. I'll get to you in a sec, Marilyn, about Quebec. It might be that you say, well, we can never go to that parish because I know James Martin is the priest there. Fine. That's you being against a particular error. That's you being against heresy. You're not necessarily against the people there. In any case, so when it comes to Justin, I think I hear some noise in the background there. I'm not sure. But when it gets to the point where you go somewhere because it's an anti-stance, then in my opinion, that's the kind of stance that makes you into like a negative Nancy, makes you a stereotype of what a traditionalist is. And it's not good for your spiritual life because it's not good to be motivated by negativity. So for me, quickly, I wanted to make sure that I was going to go somewhere to mass because I was for something. That's what I want it to do. I want it to be positive. I think that's healthy for our spiritual lives. I don't want to say I'm shaking my fist at all times, and that's why I'm going to this place. That's not healthy. I don't care if you go wherever you go. That's not healthy. Okay. So at that point, I wasn't sure what I believed. I wanted to guard against that. I wanted to be careful with that. So I started dealing with this idea of crisis, and I thought, well, I don't know if the crisis at my parish is bad enough. And then I thought, my goodness gracious, the simple fact that I'm actually worried about having to jump ship because I don't know what my bishop's going to do, and I don't know what the seminary is going to form the priests in, and whatever. That in and of itself was a crisis. That was a revelation for me, saying it's not about the fact that I have to wait for James Martin to come in and give a Pachamama service in my parish. The fact that I'm worried that that's possible, that's the crisis. That's the point. So it's indubitable. It's you cannot doubt the fact that we're in a crisis. We've been in it for a long time. So within the crisis, you have to act prudently. And what has the Society of St. Pius X done? They've never said they have parishes in the official sense. Of course, people will use that term when they're just sort of colloquially speaking. The bishops don't have any jurisdiction over any geographical area. They don't have a diocese. And it's all about the salvation of souls. Can you go there? Of course you can. Rome has said you can. Anyone who says that you cannot go there and that you'll be disobedient to Rome in doing so, ironically, is disobeying Rome by saying that, whether they know it or not. So that's kind of the irony of it. And there is church history for this. The Arian crisis was a big deal, and it was as bad as ours. Mars might be worse if you think about it, because we live in the synthesis of all heresies. We don't just have one to deal with. And Bishop St. Athanasius acted against this. You can read about him more. St. Eusebius as well. One of the Eusebiuses, he went so far as to actually go around, because he was so worried that the bishops and priests were so malformed. He actually went around. You can read this in Bishop Lefebvre's biography. He went around to different dioceses consecrating bishops because he wanted to have solid bishops. And he actually gave them jurisdiction. He was saying they actually had mandates over various areas. And he's a saint. Marcel Lefebvre did not go even close to that far, and took painstaking effort to make sure he didn't go that far, because he didn't want to give the impression of an actual schism, which he never committed. Pope Benedict XVI is said to have, and this is a LifeSite article, and I trust the sources. I know the source. I know the people at LifeSite who write these things, and we know their sources are reliable. We have some inside scoop. Benedict XVI, I believe it was 2002 or 2006. The article's there somewhere. He said Marcel Lefebvre was the most important bishop of the 20th century. That's kind of a big deal. There was a German cardinal who's anonymous so far, but we know for a fact that it was verified. Said Marcel Lefebvre will be a doctor of the church one day. Marcel Lefebvre is a saint. Society of St. Pius X is formed after him and in his vision. And Cardinal Gagnon, who was given the task of putting together a dossier on the crisis in the church by Pope Paul VI, took 3 years to do so. He told a priest friend of mine verbatim, every diocese, every seminary on earth should be formed, should follow the model of the Society of St. Pius X. So you can go there. And right now, you're going to have to make that decision. Last thing I'm going to say before I got to get off here on the free stream. Thanks for joining me at Meaning of Catholic. Want to hear the rest of this? Go to crusadechannel.com/go right after. And there is a free stream available. Go to crusadechannel.com. You press listen. You want to hear the whole thing, but here's some of it. I wrote an article at Crisis today. It's called Use Your Catholic Sense. Or rely on your Catholic sense. Catholics have gone through things like this before. You're not going to find a perfect answer in a blog or on a YouTube thing. Whatever I say is meaningless if you choose not to agree with me. I couldn't care less. You have to kneel in front of icons, lay prostrate in front of the Holy Eucharist, if your bishop will let you in. Go to confession, pray your rosary, and make a decision just the way Catholics have always done in times of crisis. That's all you can do. And nobody else can tell you otherwise. That's kind of my point. So thank you for joining me on the Meaning of Catholic live stream. I can get to your question, Marilyn. If you go to crusadechannel.com/go after the break, I promise I'll get to it. I'm sorry I couldn't get to it. I'll be back after the break, ladies and gentlemen, at crusadechannel.com. This is the Kennedy Profession here on the Crusade channel, which is the last live radio station standing.